Ladies and gentlemen, we have an exciting webinar series for you today. I am thrilled to feature Trident Strategic Partners in our 2025 series. You're kicking off the year for us in a great way. How are we doing today, guys?
Doing well, yeah. Thanks, Nicole. Really excited. Appreciate you having us and appreciate everyone joining.
How about you, James? I know your
Doing great.
internet's out, but we're doing okay.
Yeah, we're doing all right. We're doing all right. Thank God for hotspots, right? No, we're doing great. Besides internet issues, we're doing great down here in Charlotte.
Awesome. Love to hear it, guys. To start us off, can you tell us a little bit more about Trident Strategic Partners and what makes your approach to real estate asset management, specifically through TridentRE, unique?
Yeah, well, thanks again. I'd say Trident Strategic Partners is broadly an investment advisory firm. We are an REA and our focus is on private markets. So we work directly with some high net worth individuals, but our primary client focus is small to mid-size REAs who are looking for an outsourced solution for their private market or alternative investing programs. So we handle everything from sourcing and due diligence to investment policy creation, implementation, ongoing monitoring. Within that ecosystem, TridentRE serves as our platform for direct asset management in the real estate space. So early in our existence, it kind of became clear to us that we needed to, I'll say, source differentiated opportunities kind of outside of those blue chip, large cap asset managers in the space. And so TridentRE became the platform by which we were taking on these opportunities. So it's really as for us to be able to kind of effectively package some of these independent sponsor, fundless sponsor style real estate opportunities, we really need to step in as a co-sponsor and asset manager. So TridentRE and the work that James does on that front for us is it was our first entrance into that asset management space, and then we've since expanded into early stage equity for some operating companies as well.
Wow, wonderful. Thank you so much for, separating the two and really giving our audience, some background on both opportunities. For those in our audience who might be less familiar, can you provide a clear definition of the Brownfield redevelopment opportunity and explain why it's an attractive investment in today's market?
Yeah, sure. So brownfield redevelopment can take a lot of forms, different requirements and consideration given the regulatory framework that a given project may sit in, whether that's federal or state, and if it's state, what state, right? So it's hard to kind of paint with a broad brush. We'll keep things kind of general, given that. So, I mean, at its core, it's really about taking underutilized or abandoned properties, often with an industrial use, but not necessarily, often with potential environmental contamination, though not necessarily, and transforming those into productive assets. So think old factories or even closed gas stations or vacant lots that you might see that sit in urban locations. So while these are often overlooked because there's some nuance into what's needed to revitalize them, a lot of times these hold really attractive, incredible potential. So and on the environmental side, that's a broad term as well. That can be anything from soil or groundwater pollution to asbestos in old buildings and kind of anywhere in between. But and then from an investment opportunity set, there's really a few, I think, key driving factors. One is market demand. So I mentioned a lot of these are in urban kind of infill areas that are being revitalized or redone. And there's really just a shortage, right, of available land for development, kind of infill urban areas. So you've got a unique opportunity to create, new housing, commercial spaces, community amenities, and really desirable locations. That supply demand mismatch is obviously beneficial for investors. Government incentives can be another really big piece that's accretive. So whether you're talking about federal or state governments, there can be a range of incentives from tax credits, grants, liability protections. And so that can both reduce costs and enhance returns. And then finally, I think in the current backdrop of environmental or sustainably responsible investing, brownfield redevelopment is not just financially sound. There's this environmental overlay to it. So by cleaning up contaminated sites, you're creating healthier communities, revitalizing whole neighborhoods around some of these sites. So it really aligns with that growing demand for sustainable and socially conscious investments.
And can you just give the audience some clarity on where the locations are?
Yeah, so again, they can really be, and we sit in Charlotte, right? So we sit in a metro center, but you see these anywhere from, traditionally urban or more densely
Okay.
populated areas to even rural areas, right? So you think
Mhm.
about these metros that start creeping and expanding out. You've got old farmland that may have had issues with fertilizer or some things that were just done
Sure.
differently over the last 50 to 75 years. So you really see them kind of across the map. Our focus is more in the urban centers, but you see them everywhere, really.
Understood. Well, speaking about investment opportunities, I have to put my disclaimer in here, guys. Madison Trust Company, we are a passive custodian, so we're not able to solicit any specific deals to investors. We really encourage all of our clients to do their own due diligence on the investments they choose to hold within their IRA accounts, as we are passive and can't provide any tax, legal, or investment advice. Okay, now that that's wrapped up, back to business. So, brownfield redevelopment typically involves a complex web of regulations and stakeholders. What are some of the key advantages and challenges investors might consider when evaluating a brownfield project?
Yeah, so we certainly hit on some of those advantages, but as the investment opportunity set, but they obviously come with some complexity and challenges as well. I mean, on the advantages side, one thing I like is called the first mover advantage, right? So these are again often sites that are in very prime locations that are on the cusp of revitalizing or transforming, and so you've got this a lot of times ability to kickstart what's going on in a potential area. So that leads to more significant appreciation. There's also not a lot of people that focus on this space. So compared to the counterpart, the traditional kind of greenfield development, there's just a lot less competition for these sites, given some of the complexities. So it gives you a little bit more negotiating power as you're looking at these sites. And then financial incentives, right, which we hit on. That's a big piece of it. State and federal governments are incentivized to see these sites revitalized for a number of reasons. I mean, just increasing the tax value alone on this land is accretive. So those financial incentives are plentiful and can really be a big advantage. But on the challenges side, that environmental piece is
Mhm.
really, I think, the crux of it. Being able to assess and mitigate the contamination that you're finding. That's a critical and also complex aspect. So it requires really specialized expertise and partnerships and really thorough due diligence. The
So
regulatory piece. Oh, go ahead.
that's really how you navigate that, right? Is through those complexities is your partnerships.
That's right. And we'll hit on that more, but it's, we have a team of environmental consultants, attorneys,
Mhm.
land use, civil engineers, architects, even PR professionals to help as we navigate some of the interactions with the local community and the community engagement piece. So it really is about finding the right partners kind of through the stack that are highly, say, specialized in their knowledge base. That's a big piece of ensuring a successful outcome on a given project. That's right.
Amazing. And can you walk us a little bit through the typical life cycle of a brownfield real development project, from the initial assessment to the final development?
Yeah, sure. So ideally, you want to have a fairly lengthy, at least relative to a greenfield or a more traditional project due diligence phase,
Mhm.
right? So you're going to want to do phase one and sometimes phase two environmental site assessments, off-site assessments, right, to gauge if there's issues stemming from a site that have gotten into local drinking water or migrated off-site.
Mhm.
Geophysical evaluations, wetland surveys, I mean, kind of a lot of the pieces that you would normally do, but it's hypercritical to be able to get that done, I think, pre-acquisition. Um, you're also able to apply for, in some cases, the brownfield eligibility or entrance into a given program while you're under due diligence. prior to closing on the dirt, which kind of speeds up your timeline or shortens your timeline as you're going through. And that really is a big key, is getting eligibility into a program. And so
Mhm.
most times that involves, assessing that a site does have a viable economic plan. You can't just say, well, we're in the middle of a rural area and we're going to put, a 10 floor apartment here or office building here, right? It has to be a viable solution. And a lot of times in North Carolina specifically, is the case, you have to prove that you're not an existing beneficial owner in the property. So to take something through the brownfield process, you need to be a sort of prospective developer, a non-polluting party to go through
Mhm.
the process. And all this is kind of put into that initial application into a brownfield program. And then once you're approved, it really becomes a very iterative process of working with the right parties to craft an environmental management plan and actually do the work. So at some point in this process, you're acquiring the dirt, you're getting into a brownfield program, you're getting that environmental management plan in place, and then you're doing the blocking and tackling of, whether it's taking out bad dirt, putting new dirt in, putting in vapor mitigation systems, whatever is required by the environmental management plan. And then as you're going through that, you're redoing soil testing, you're redoing all of these things, trying to make sure that you're into the acceptable ranges given the contaminant or contaminants that you're working with. And then a lot of times, then you'll ultimately get that brownfield certificate or kind of that stamp of approval by the regulatory body. And a lot of times that still comes with ongoing kind of post remediation work and ongoing monitoring of site. It can come with use restrictions too. So you're, kind of pigeonholed into different types of products you can ultimately put on the dirt once you go through the brownfield. So that's a broadly the process kind of from pre-acquisition, acquisition, ultimately to acquiring a brownfield certificate and beyond.
Yeah, I mean, you could tell that there's a few hurdles that you have to overcome in order to get that stamp of approval. So it must be a great milestone for when you finally do get that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, absolutely.
so environmental cleanup is generally a central component of brownfield redevelopment. And really, what a great testament to your values here. I mean, I share the sentiment in wanting to keep our earth clean, not only for my generation, but for future generations and even your generation. I'm kidding. You guys aren't that old.
Yikes.
But how does Trident RE assess and manage environmental risks? And what strategies do you employ to ensure projects meet regulatory standards and are financially viable?
Yeah, so we talked earlier about those partners, right? So a big piece of what we're looking to do is to put in the right team, right? The right partners across consultants, attorneys, architects. I would add, brokers, contractors to that mix. So you'll
Mhm.
need an environmental consultant to kind of, in that due diligence phase, help you make heads or tails of the scope of potential contamination, understanding what work is going to be needed. They'll go out and get bids in that
Mhm.
process. You understand kind of a best case, worst case, and what your cost would be. They're also there to interact with those regulatory officials, prepare those brownfield applications, which can be, 1,000 to 2,000 pages long in some instances, and
Mhm.
also help you kind of navigate those applicable incentive programs. Likewise with attorneys, they can help on that piece too. Attorneys are also there to help structure the transaction, the actual acquisition, which a lot of times has some, I would say, different considerations aside from price that can be really impactful. So they're helping you to navigate that transaction as well as standing up the entity and kind of papering the entity that you'll be bringing investors into. And there's different ways that you can segment out particular risk and structure that. So you really need a lot of lift on that front. The rezoning entitlement process also is
Mhm.
something that is usually part of this process. It's kind of separate from the brownfield side, but usually something that's done in conjunction. You're taking something that was light or heavy industrial and moving it into a mixed use or a multifamily or some other designation. So a lot of times that rezoning is kind of done alongside. And then when you're thinking about ultimately your exit, whether you're going to sell to someone that will do that vertical development, or you're kind of vertically integrated, you're going to take that on yourself. You kind of need to understand, given a piece of property, what are your potential uses, right? Like what's viable on that site. So you talk about broker relationships, right? People that can help you understand in a given submarket, what the needs are from a product type, and then what that dirt would trade for given a given product type, and what building costs are locally, so you can start to narrow in on that in conjunction with architects and how you would lay out that site, and what the best and highest use is as you start kind of structuring that for investors. And I would say the contractors too play a really big part of this. I mean, they're the ones that
Sure.
are doing that remediation work, and a lot of times that can be pretty straightforward. But a lot of times, especially given recent kind of advancements in this space, kind of in
Mhm.
situ treatments or other innovative kind of excavation processes, they can really create a lot of value for investors, and can really compress the expenses needed on a site. They're really doing a lot of cool stuff there. So, and I mentioned earlier, there's PR professionals, which is not my expertise.
Yeah.
That kind of fell into marketing for me, and I didn't truly understand kind of the boots on the ground that a lot of these organizations can bring to bear, right? So
Mhm.
you've got this great story of revitalization that's great for the neighborhood, great for the local communities, municipal governments, et cetera. But there can be pushback, obviously, especially if you're taking something that was an old gas station. You're like, we're going to put a sixth floor multifamily development here. There can
Sure.
be some friction. And so I think having the right messaging and having the right partners to take that message to the various stakeholders is really impactful too. So there's project management is a big piece of what we do, right? It's kind of managing all of these different pieces and making sure that you have the right team in place that's experienced, has relationships in the brownfield regulatory space that really help you unlock that value.
Thank you so much, Chris. That was a wonderful answer. Um, Many investors seem to be interested in tax incentives and other financial benefits associated with brownfield projects. Can you shed some light on the types of incentives available and how TridentRE helps clients access these opportunities?
Yeah, so I can give a similar disclaimer that you gave, that we are not CPAs
Mhm.
or tax professionals, so certainly advise. That's
Mhm.
part of the value that we do bring as we're structuring these things. But on a given project, certainly advise you to do your own due diligence, work with your tax professionals, et cetera. But there's a few layers, right? So on the federal side, there's tax deductions, grants. The Opportunity Zone program is something that you see a lot, given where these properties tend to sit. A lot of them happen to be in opportunity zones, and there's not really duplicative or multiple values from doing that, but you've got this OZ wrapper that can be really helpful as well. On the state side, similar kind of tax credits and grants. Property taxes can be a piece of that. Liability protections can be a
Mhm.
big piece of that. So here in North Carolina, when you are able to secure a brownfield certificate, that's really a covenant not to sue. So it's the state saying that we're not going to come back to you for an issue on this site and sue you. And you really have to have that if you're doing traditional financing for a project.
Sure.
So
Mhm.
no bank is going to loan against something that could potentially be written to zero. So that
The
liability
liability.
protection,
Mhm.
yeah, is a
Mhm.
really big piece of it, right? So it's not necessarily a tax incentive, but a really key piece of it. Um, and then locally, we found that on a city or county level, same kind of potential tax credits or tax abatements for uh, property taxes, which are great because they can actually transfer at the sale.
Mhm.
So, as your tax base increases, that figure becomes larger, but a lot of times it really becomes larger once you put that end product on it. And it can be almost up to 90% in some cases that you're able to reduce your and for 5, 10 years. So that can be really helpful as you're looking to ultimately sell to a group that will do the vertical development. It just helps
Mhm.
them pencil out projects a lot better. And then little things like applications for rezoning, fees being waived, expedited permitting. There's just these little
Mhm.
nuances that once you get in there, and again, everyone's kind of aligned in seeing these projects be successful, right? You've got polluted dirt, community doesn't like that. You've got
Nope.
something that's unproductive that's usually in a good location. Local government doesn't like that because the tax base isn't what it should be on those properties. So there's a lot of alignment and a lot of incentives kind of throughout the food chain, whether you're talking about federal or state or local municipalities.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I could even see in my town where there's so many empty lots and you want to just be able to maximize that space for more community type related things. And if a multifamily syndication or rebuilding is an opportunity there, that's amazing. So we are definitely looking forward to the future with Trident RE as well as Trident Strategic Partners. For investors who are interested in learning more about this project or what your company has in the future, can you tell them what next steps would be to get started?
Yeah, sure. So I think you may have a slide that has our contact information on it. So you can see this is actually taken from a project that we're working on currently. So I can give you a brief overview of that just to have a real world example. But if there's questions on this project specifically, or just looking to learn about the space more broadly, or if there's even an investment opportunity that you may have seen that you think fits this area, we'd love to hear about it or talk about it. So our emails, cell phones listed there. So please reach out to either James or myself. And then I think it'd be helpful to hear about a project that we're working on currently, just to kind of frame everything we've been talking about. So again, we sit in Charlotte, so a lot of markets that are infill Charlotte have been built at this point. So really, if you're looking for something in a denser part of Charlotte, you're probably going to have to go through a brownfield process. It's kind of the cost of doing business in this area. So, project that we're working on currently sits in the South End submarket for those that are familiar with Charlotte at any level, and that's probably our densest, most populated submarket that we have. It was historically all industrial, going back over 100 years, and so we acquired in January 18 acres, a little over 18 acres from Electrolux, the multinational conglomerate industrial manufacturing group. This site had been industrial use since the 1930s, had traded hands a few times. Very dense vision for the site, given the submarket, but we also sit against a single family residential community. And so lot to navigate there with mixed use, wanting to build very high in some parts, being restricted on what we can build in others. So we've got this really great kind of blank canvas to get the environmental work done, go through that brownfield process, which we're currently in the brownfield program, working with the state, the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality, to put together that environmental management plan. But we've ultimately were able to acquire 18 acres with a cost basis below 3 million in an area where dirt for multi-use development trades for 8 to 10. And the reason we were able to get that great cost basis is we were only, one of the only groups that were able to buy the dirt without a brownfield contingency in place. So that kind of speaks to that narrow opportunity set and groups that are willing to take this on. And that really was able to drive the cost basis on the project, which is ultimately going to be accretive to us and to our investors. So, but yeah, welcome any follow up. Certainly reach out to us.